to what we have in the space shuttle days. So, different suit, different vehicle, but all the necessity steps to go up into the capsule should feel similar. So I'm pretty sure they are relaxed. Of course, they are very excited.
I'm sure they are. Gokatsu yaku wo oinori shite imasu. Honjitsu wa arigato gozaimashita. Thank you so much, Soichi, for joining us today.
Oh, Marina, you are so good. Domo arigato. And we'll both enjoy the beautiful lunch today. Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good luck with your launch later this year. And as the excitement builds towards launch, I will send it back to you.
Thank you, Marina. I now have the distinct pleasure of being joined by one of NASA's record-setting astronauts and a recent resident aboard the International Space Station, Christina Cook. Christina, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Dan.
Christina, we're coming up on 20 years of continuous human presence on the space station, and you were one of those humans. What's it like to see a new milestone like this launch unfold after so much history already?
So much history indeed. It is really just such a testament to NASA. Not only are we pushing the boundaries of knowledge and discovery and exploration, but we're pushing the boundaries on how we accomplish that mission. We're bringing in commercial partners. We're fostering a space economy. So we're making sure that we're always pushing forward, always taking that next step. I think it's such a privilege to be part of an organization that recognizes if we're not actually making steps and innovating every single time we do this, then we're not truly answering humanity's call to explore and to push those boundaries.
Christina, I know Bob and Doug are veterans themselves, but what advice do you have for Bob and Doug, given your experience as a long-duration station crew member?
Well, being able to live on board the International Space Station and work there is just such a privilege. You know, you're a steward of this amazing laboratory that's bringing so many benefits down to Earth and also learning how we can push farther into the universe. So it is quite an honor, and I think that's the main thing about how it feels to be up there for a long duration. You know, in terms of advice, Bob and Doug have been great mentors for me. They've given me advice for so many years. It's strange to be the one who could be in a position to offer them anything. But I would say that as, you know, shuttle flyers, they used to participate in missions that were really, really intense, go, go, go all the time. Long duration space flight is more of a marathon than a sprint. So I would tell them to take that moment, enjoy it, and, you know, really welcome the opportunity to have part of your mission be taking it all in and sharing that with the people that got you there.
Thanks again, Christina. Always a pleasure to hear from you and fantastic words. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So once again, once Bob and Doug arrive at the station, they'll be greeted by astronaut Chris Cassidy, but before we do that, let's toss to a briefing.
Hello, everyone. I'm astronaut Chris Cassidy, commander of Expedition 63 on board the International Space Station, flying 250 miles above the Earth. Like you, I'm excited about today's launch and the possibilities it will bring to America and to the world. But also, I'm very excited that two close friends will be arriving and joining the crew. I had the privilege of flying with Doug Hurley on both of our first shuttle missions back in 2009. Together, we came to the International Space Station and helped construct the amazing facility that it is today. Although this will be my first mission with Bob, it was my honor to follow him as the chief of the office when he left back in 2015 to begin training for this amazing mission. Personally, I've been very fortunate to fly in two different spacecraft. Launching from America on the shuttle, and most recently launching from Kazakhstan in the Soyuz. But I can't tell you how exciting it is to know that we're once again launching Americans from the coast of Florida. And finally, here's a story I'd like to share with you. Back in 1981, John Young and Bob Crippen launched on Space Shuttle Columbia, the very first space shuttle flight, marking the last time we flew Americans on a brand new vehicle.
434, Mike, QRE. Roger.
With them, they flew an American flag, representing America's technical prowess.
Roger, roll, Atlanta.
30 years later, that same flag was flown to the International Space Station. This flag remains here today, waiting for Bob and Doug. Our flag means so many things to our country, and this small piece of America represents what we'll be able to achieve together. We'll never stop exploring. And so Bob and Doug can take this very special flag home to Earth, where it awaits its next journey to the cosmos. In a few years, the first Orion crew will take this flag with it around the moon. All of this starts today. I'll be watching outside the window along with everyone else in America and around the world. I can't wait to look out the window and see my friends on close approach. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and go Bob and Doug. I'll see you soon.
And that was a very special message from NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy, right now the lone American aboard the International Space Station, so he will be ready and waiting to welcome Bob and Doug when they arrive tomorrow, if liftoff happens today, a little later tomorrow morning. The countdown now stands at T-minus 1 hour, 25 minutes, 54 seconds, and counting until launch. And we'd like to share with you just how much has happened here at Kennedy Space Center since the last time we had a crew on the pad launching from here. As you can imagine, the end of the shuttle era was a bittersweet moment for many people across this spaceport. But in the end, we knew we were striving for this day, and here we are. Joining us now is Kennedy Space Center's Deputy Director, Janet Petro, on the comeback we've seen across Florida's Space Coast. She's with Daryl Nail now at OSB2. Daryl?
Yeah, thank you, Marie. Janet, you were just telling me you were there at the crew walkout. Tell me a little bit about what you saw between the astronauts and their families.
So it's very historic. It was very emotional. So when Doug and Bob first came out of the doors, you know, of course, a cheer went up from everybody. You know, the Vice President was there, Elon was there, the crew families was there, and of course, Bob, myself, and the rest of the center leadership was there to cheer them on. But then, you know, when they came out and then they went to the families, and Bob Benkin said, "Virtual hug," and he shouted out, "Virtual hug," and he did this motion, and of course his child also did that virtual hug, and so I guess that's the tradition of doing a virtual hug with the families. And then they, you know, then they walked and got in the Tesla, either side, and the family walked right up to the window of the Tesla and were talking, you know, having a private last moment with their father, hand on the window. It was very emotional. I had tears in my eyes. I don't know how many other people had tears in their eyes, but it was really a special, emotional moment, and everybody was, of course, wishing them well. A lot of I love yous, a lot of Godspeeds, a lot of Ad Astra, you know, take care, all of that. So it was very special.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And in the context of why it's so important, Janet, you remember, you've been here since 2007.
Yep.
You were here at 2011 when Shuttle Atlantis came to wheel stop. I've talked to my uncle and father who worked out here. You know, layoff notices went out like the next day when the shuttle came to a stop. It was a very sad time. Bob Cabana, the director here, called it depressing. Tell me about that time and how far we've come.
Yeah, so as you note, it was the end of a very iconic program. You know, a lot of people had spent their entire career working on the Space Shuttle program. So 135 flights, all of them launching from Launch Complex 39, many from 39A, where we're going to be launching from today, and then returning back, you know, at the shuttle landing facility. Those two iconic sonic booms was something that all along the Space Coast people really resonated with. It really felt in their hearts and looked forward to. So it was a very sad time, but I will tell you that 30-year program, we had planned for it. The workforce was incredible. You know, there was a lot of people who, as I said, spent their entire career here, and they wanted to safely fly that shuttle out, and then they retired. There was also another large group of people that just wanted to put on their resume that they had been privileged to work on the space shuttle. So the workforce I was incredibly proud of, because they were resilient, they were dedicated, they were committed to safely flying out that shuttle. They didn't skip any steps, and regardless, as you said, that they knew they were getting their layoff notices. I think it landed on a Wednesday. They were getting their layoff notice on a Friday. They were in it till the end to make sure we safely flew it out. And of course, you know, we had 14,000 workers out here then, which we have a lot fewer here today. And of course, our guest operations, you remember those last shuttle flights, everybody around the country wanted to be a part of that experience. And we at the center really leaned forward to maximize how many people we could get both on site, and never mind how many people were lined up at the beaches all along the river to watch that last flight. And of course, today with COVID, unfortunately, we weren't able to have any on-site guest operations, which was pretty sad for this historic flight. But I'll bet that there's a ton of people watching from the beaches or from even their TV as we launch here today.
I'm sure there is, and tribute to your leadership and Bob Cabana's as well. Getting things turned around here as a multi-user spaceport, getting the commercial entities in here. We appreciate all that you've done to make that happen. Janet Petro, appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Daryl.
All right, Marie, we'll toss it back to you.
All right, thanks, Daryl. And as NASA and SpaceX have worked for years to get to this moment, today's mission opens the door to an entirely new era in human spaceflight, not only for astronauts, but someday for the general public as well.
From the beginning, it has been our mission at SpaceX to help make humanity a multiplanetary species. And today's mission is an important step towards that goal. The key to opening up space access for people like you and me is reusability. Without it, traveling to space is just far too expensive for the average person to do. Imagine how expensive a flight from LA to New York would be if you had to throw the plane away after a single trip.
A lot.
Yeah, exactly. That ticket would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and almost no one could ever afford to fly. Both the Dragon spacecraft and the Falcon 9 rocket are designed to be reusable, which not only improves the reliability of the vehicles in that they're flight proven again and again, but it also drives down cost. This is essential to enabling not just a handful of people, but rather hundreds of thousands of people to get out there and to explore the moon, Mars, beyond. And I, for one, it is my dream to visit Jupiter's ocean moon, Europa. Leland, you're one of the lucky Earthlings that's had the opportunity to get off the planet and go explore. Where would you like to go next?
You know, Lauren, I think I would like to go to Mars and, you know, be there for, about a year each way and then a year on the Martian surface. But the one condition I would have to have, my pups would have to go with me because it's about exploring new places, but taking your family with you. You know, we have these crewmates that are people that you get to know and love, you know, over a course of training, but it's nothing like having your family with you. And I think that's something that we're going to be seeing in the future, people living and working on other planets as a family.
I think
Absolutely.
there are a lot of people who want to see your dogs with you in space.
Well, we've seen them in an official portrait. I know that the dogs came in with you to take a picture in your spacesuit back in the day.
Yeah,
There it is.
We kind of snuck them in, no dogs allowed at NASA.
Well, they had their moment.
They sure did.
And knowing that the opportunity to fly to space as a private citizen or a private dog maybe one day is right around the corner, we have a new poll question on Twitter for you. So if you were given the opportunity, would you travel to space? Let us know, and we'll share the results a little bit later.
All stations come
All right, well, there is not a lot of cargo.
Chief Engineer Technical Poll for launch escape arming and propellant loop.
All right, now while there's not a lot of cargo in today's mission, Dragon is carrying 2 special payloads, aside from Bob and Doug, of course. The first is a series of custom art pieces entitled Humankind by Los Angeles artist Tristan Eaton. These indestructible double-sided paintings are made from gold, brass, and aluminum, and they celebrate how far humanity has come as well as how far we still have to go. It includes a beautiful homage to the Saturn V rocket as well as a nod to Bob and Doug's current ride to space. You can find more images and information about these pieces on SpaceX's social channels. Next, in the spirit of inspiring the next generation of explorers, we wanted to celebrate the class of 2020, from kindergarten all the way through graduate school. SpaceX and NASA invited students from around the world to submit their photo to fly on America's first human spaceflight in nearly a decade. Each graduate's photo was used to create a mosaic image of the planet Earth, which we printed and is being flown aboard Bob and Doug's flight on the Crew Dragon spacecraft. We received nearly 100,000 photos. So thank you and congratulations to all the world's graduates.
I am so proud of what we're doing today, and I think about regular people flying in space on a SpaceX rocket one day. When I first went to space, I thought my primary task of installing the Columbus laboratory would be my aha moment, but it was when Peggy Whitson invited us over to the Russian segment to have a meal. She said, "You guys bring the rehydrated vegetables, we'll have the meat." And we're doing this, having this meal, and it's with African American, Asian American, French, German, Russian, the first female commander breaking bread at 17,500 miles an hour, going around the planet every 90 minutes. And when I think of that perspective shift that I got looking out the window, flying over my hometown, flying over Leo's hometown in Paris, flying over Yuri's hometown in Russia, it brought us all together as a civilization. And I think that's what spaceflight does for us. The more people that have the opportunity to go to space will feel like it's an international family of people working together for the good of humanity and all humankind.
Absolutely, and it's exactly what that piece of art was all about.
Yeah. And following today's mission, we will be one step closer to a future where we can all have that experience. We can all have that orbital perspective and the ability to explore new worlds. In just over an hour from now, Bob and Doug will be the first people to launch on an American vehicle in almost a decade. For the team at SpaceX, it's really hard to put into words how honored we feel about the trust that Bob, Doug, and NASA have put into our team to carry out this critical mission. I worked on Crew Dragon for 2 years, and I can just imagine what all of my friends and colleagues are thinking right now as they sit in anticipation and excitement for what's to come.
Absolutely. And speaking of those who have carried the hopes and dreams of science and exploration, we have a few shout outs to share with you from some big fans of NASA and SpaceX.
Wow, we're making history again. The NASA program. I am there with you guys in spirit. Bob, Doug, good luck. I know you'll be fine. I'll be watching and got everything crossed, arms, legs. I'm tied in a knot. Can't wait for you to get back safely.
This is the first time a U.S.-built rocket has taken people into space in 9 years. It's quite an accomplishment. So for us at the Planetary Society, more rockets means more exploration. More people in space means more exploration. More countries involved in the endeavor of spaceflight means more exploration. This is how we know the cosmos and our place within it. So congratulations, SpaceX. Here's wishing your team, and the crew especially, a safe journey and the joy of discovery. Let's go.
And a big thanks to William Shatner and Bill Nye for those well wishes. And while we're keeping an eye on the pad, we want to bring in NASA astronaut Rex Walheim. If that name rings a bell, it's because he flew 3 space shuttle missions to the International Space Station, including the final one by Atlantis, STS-135. He was one of the last 4 people to ascend the tower at Pad 39A and head to space. And he currently is Deputy Director of Safety and Mission Assurance at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Rex Walheim, thanks for joining us. You and Leland actually flew together.
Hey, Rex
We did.
Dog.
Great flight. Really enjoyed flying with Leland. Hey, old dog.
Rex, you flew on the final shuttle mission, we said STS-135 with Doug, in fact. What's it like seeing him in Crew Dragon right now?
It's great. This is what we've been looking forward to. You know, after the end of the shuttle program, you know, it was a very important time where we wanted to transition to this commercialization of space flight to allow these commercial companies to take our astronauts to and from the space station. So in the 9 years we've had since we last landed on Atlantis, we've really worked hard for that. We've worked with our SpaceX partners and our Boeing partners, and here we are. Today's the day. We're taking that first step in this new era.
What do you remember most about launch day for STS-135?
I think it was just you felt the weight of it. The space shuttle was a storied program, 135 flights, and thousands of people had poured their lives into this program to launch probes to the planets, to launch the Hubble Space Telescope, and then, of course, to build the International Space Station. So you knew the incredible accomplishments of this program, and so you wanted to finish strong. And then when it finally became launch day, you'd finished the studying, you'd worked really hard, and now it was time to kind of soak it in. And I think that's what Bob and Doug are doing right now. They're sitting on the vehicle, talking to each other, listening to the sounds, and feeling the vibrations as it starts up. And it's going to be a great experience for them.
Hi, Rex. What is your take on private astronauts going to space?
I think it's great. I think the more we can do to commercialize space, to make access easier, the better we are. And I think that's part of this whole program. You get the cost down, then more people can afford it. And you get the cost down, you can do more things in space, more science, more research. And it is a transformative experience to fly in space, and I wish more people could see that. When you look out on the planet, like Levin was talking about earlier, with your crewmates from different countries all around the world, it gives you a different perspective. It gives you a perspective that we're all crewmates on this planet Earth. And we kind of get that now with the pandemic. We understand that we're all in this together. And that's what the space program does, and I want to see more people get a chance to see the Earth from that vantage point, and I think it'll bring us all closer together.
Okay, Rex, a very serious question here. The worm or the meatball?
Leland, I saw you dissing the worm earlier. How can you do that? The worm is awesome. I'm so glad to have the NASA worm insignia back. It's great.
All right, well, thank you very much, Rex. We appreciate you. And as we watch Bob and Doug there in the capsule, we are an hour, 10 minutes, 57 seconds and counting from launch, and we're going to send it over to Hawthorne for an update. Jesse?
Thanks, Marie. We're just an hour and 13 minutes away from launch, and things are really getting ready to pick up here. Since arriving at the spacecraft, Bob and Doug were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide breathing air, pressurized nitrox, and a communication link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks, which were successful, and communications checks with the Corps here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the entire mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites that we'll use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
That's right, and after those suit checks were complete, the closeout team was able to seal up the hatch, which also got its own leak check, and we confirmed that it was good to go. The closeout team at this point has already departed the area around the pad. They were about 25 minutes ahead of their schedule, and right now weather operators are kicking off their final check on wind speeds at the pad, which are going to be used, and they're really important for that final go, no-go for launch. Before we get to that final go, no-go, various teams at both NASA and SpaceX are going to do some internal go polls, just making sure conditions are good with Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in with Houston real quick for a status on the team there supporting the space station on their readiness for launch.
In Mission Control Houston, led by Flight Director Zeb Scoville, has been polled, and we're go for launch. All systems on board the station that are required to be healthy for the mission are reported good, and we're standing by. Station conditions are normal, and the trajectory is meet right up with the orbiting complex as planned. Chris Cassidy aboard the International Space Station is finishing up some tasks, going into his pre-sleep period, and will be able to watch the launch of Bob and Doug. Mission Control Houston will largely be in a monitor mode for the first 18 hours of the flight, with the team here really jumping into the mix tomorrow when Dragon gets in range of the International Space Station and we begin integrated operations. So I'll send it back. Everything's green on our board from the International Space Station. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and Godspeed to Bob and Doug.
All right, thank you, Gary. If you are just now joining us, you picked a really good time because we are 1 hour, 8 minutes and counting away from launch. And this is our coverage for this mission known as Demonstration Mission 2 or Demo 2. Liftoff time still holding for 4:33 p.m. Eastern, tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon, and we're still waiting for that weather to hopefully cooperate. We're still tracking a few things like precipitation and flight through clouds. We're hoping that clears within the next 20 minutes or so. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room and made their way out to Launch Pad 39A. They walked out of the crew quarters building just as every astronaut to fly from this spaceport has done since Apollo 7. They were transported to the pad where the crew now on board the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and we're continuing to get views of them inside that cabin live.
Today is a historic launch. It will be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people into orbit, and the first time since the U.S. has sent people to the space station from American soil since 2011 with retirement of the Space Shuttle program. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have Bob and Doug arm the launch escape system, and begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 4:33 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 19-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow.
Today's mission is the culmination of years of work between the teams at SpaceX and at NASA. Demo 2 is going to be an end-to-end flight test. We're going to start with launch today, go all the way to docking with the space station, and then when Bob and Doug come home, splashing down in the Atlantic. And this is going to be the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station.
And we've been hearing a little from the crew on board Dragon, which they are currently strapped into their seats, as you can see on your right screen. They're already through their seats, or they've already been strapped into their seats, and through communications and leak checks, they're able to follow all the milestones still ahead on those displays just above them that you can see there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to equalize the pressures in the common manifolds just to raise them a little bit. So we will be momentarily cycling the tank isolation valves. I just wanted to let you know for awareness.
Just wanted to take a pause to listen into the nets.
Okay, we appreciate that, Jay.
So they'll be getting insight into all of the Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed towards launch. At T-minus 1 hour and 7 minutes, let's check in with John Insprucker for a status update on both of those vehicles. What's the update, John?
Well, the good news is we've had a smooth countdown this afternoon. SpaceX team is working no technical issues on either the Falcon 9 or the Dragon spacecraft. For the Falcon 9, operators have they are actually still in work. They're going to complete in a few minutes propulsion checkouts that are being done on both the first and second stages. The team will be assessing their launch readiness with a final go, no-go poll. That'll come at T-minus 45 minutes, and that'll be followed by propellant loading starting at T-minus 35 minutes. Now, earlier today, Dragon operators performed a series of checkouts of Dragon's flight systems. The spacecraft is also currently go for launch. Our NASA crew, astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, that you can see inside the Dragon capsule on the right-hand side of the display, they are currently going through the various screens, simple checks. Their hatch is closed, suit leak checks are complete, comm checks are good. The next major event for Dragon is going to be retract of the crew access arm that you can see on the left monitor up alongside the Dragon capsule. That's going to happen somewhere between 45 and 42 minutes before liftoff. Now, the big one right now is the range. The range is currently red for launch from historic pad 39A. Now, the air and the sea space is clear, and the worldwide network of ground stations, as well as the tracking and data relay satellites, they are ready to support Dragon as it heads into orbit. But the range is red for the weather. We recently did clear, we went green for lightning, but we are still violating several constraints. Rain, cumulus clouds, field mills, which is essentially you can tell that the atmosphere is energized around the launch site. We are expecting that we'll possibly clear that. We're going to hear a weather briefing at 1 hour with the expectation that those conditions may clear shortly afterwards and allow us to move into propellant loading. Also, we've been releasing balloons. What we're seeing at the upper altitudes is conditions look good for Falcon 9 with Dragon. No concerns have been expressed by the GNC guidance team right now. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window at 4:33:35 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or just past 33 minutes after the upcoming hour. So we get one chance at it today. But currently, T-minus 1 hour and 3 minutes, just passing that. Falcon 9, Dragon are go. The range is ready to support, but now we're waiting on the weather as we've been expecting all afternoon.
Thanks, John. We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and just last year completed a test run of the mission that we're less than an hour from beginning here today.
Yeah, the purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 1 was a really exciting moment, and it paved the way for today's mission, where we are just moments away, hopefully if we get that weather, from flying U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil for the first time since 2011.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 21 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 20 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with the cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this vehicle.
Cycling is complete, expected behavior, and wanted to hear if you were able to hear those.
We actually did, Jay. We were just making a comment about that. I heard some clicking, and Bob watched it on the systems display, so absolutely.
Copy all.
And that again right there, that's the crew talking to the Corps here in Hawthorne, California, who's going to be talking to them throughout their ascent uphill today. So they were just doing a quick checkout. Bob and Doug confirmed they were able to hear it. Sounds like everything's still good, so still no issues with Falcon or Dragon. Back to what we were talking through as we're describing these systems, a lot of what SpaceX did with Cargo Dragon has been leveraged into this Crew Dragon. The vehicle is designed to be fully autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but it also features a full manual override capability if the crew needs to take control in case of emergency.
Many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment time between missions. So let's take a closer look at some of these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from bottom of the trunk to top of the nose cone, Crew Dragon's composed of two main elements. We have the capsule up top, which is designed to hold the crew and any pressurized cargo, and then an unpressurized section known as the trunk on the bottom.
And the nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system as well as the guidance navigation control system, or what we call GNC. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability
Dragon
efforts.
SpaceX, we are at T-minus 1 hour. We are go for section 6. When ready, we report go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon will put section 6 in work.
So the crew just has a couple checks,
Copy.
and when they are ready for launch, we're going to hear them report to the Corps that they are go for launch. Continuing to walk you through the Dragon spacecraft, opposite of that nose cone is the trunk. We can see it on the left-hand screen there, where it's kind of split right down the middle, with the left side black and the right side white. The trunk provides an attachment point to Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and can carry any cargo uphill. On the outside, one half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system into space using SpaceX's new Pica tiling technology. The other half contains solar cells that are used to charge the spacecraft's batteries during flight.
SpaceX Dragon, Bob and I are go for launch.
And you heard that call out right
Copy,
there.
go for launch. Next up will be the go no go pull at T-minus 45.
Bob and Doug are go for launch, and
Hey,
next
Captain,
up,
we're holding in step 6.5.
you're hearing it live from the nets. This is amazing, very exciting. The spacecraft is designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be custom sized for any crew members flying on board.
That control panel that's centered between the pilot and commander seats consists of 3 touchscreen displays, and that just again allows the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually, but also look at all of their procedures, relative position over the Earth, the space station, any alarms, alerts, anything that they could possibly want to do on Dragon is through those touchscreens.
And lastly, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
And that launch escape system was put into work a little bit earlier this year, again on that in-flight abort test. As we look to the future beyond this test flight, the first operational SpaceX crewed mission for NASA will be a little bit later this year after Bob and Doug come home. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission, being called Crew 1.
But today, Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and STS-135, which was the final space shuttle flight. Here's a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Please review your launch commit criteria. Again, this is to review and confirm no violation of launch commit criteria. We are tracking one issue with weather still. And I think we'll need to track that all the way down to launch to clear that. This polls also go for arming and launch escape system and a go for propellant load.
And this is the on Countdown Net reporting that the technical poll was completed. All systems are proceeding. We're monitoring the weather, as LD briefed. We're also looking at a watch item on a hydraulics QD rod ring. Ring pressure will come up at -8 minutes 30 seconds, and we'll be able to verify decay rate. No concerns at this time. Everything's reading nominal, but watching that item. No other constraints on Falcon 9 or ground systems.
Stage 2 RP1 bleed is complete.
All right, we just crossed the 55-minute mark away from launch. Sitting right next to Doug Hurley, who's closest to your screen, is NASA astronaut Bob Behnken. He is the Joint Operations Commander for Demo 2, and Behnken previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions, STS-123 and STS-130, and also served a tour as Chief of the Astronaut Office. So here's a little bit more about the man who said testing out a brand new spacecraft is an astronaut's dream.
When you go through the launch day preparations, there's a lot of moments that kind of stand out to you. One is the kind of the celebratory piece of it, which is that you're walking out of the suit up room and getting in the vehicle that's going to take you to the launch pad. When you close the hatch, that's really when Doug and I are in the vehicle, and it's our vehicle, and we're really in control of the mission at that point.
Test pilots, their task proved that man could fly into orbit around the Earth and return live and well to talk about it.
There's always a balance of managing risk as you go forward to execute a test point and figuring out a way to collect the data. We hear a sound. Okay, is that sound an expected sound? Or we see a light, is that light an expected light? What's the source of it? Does it sync up with something else that's going on or not? So trying to dissect all of that in real time in your head is, A lot of things happen like that on launching of a vehicle.
From St. Anne, Missouri, he is an Air Force colonel and flight test engineer. He flew aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour twice. Introducing NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000, went through the training program, primarily focused on the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, you know, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing, or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now. It's been really interesting, I think, for both my wife and I to have gone through the process of seeing each other launch in space. I've seen her take that risk and had it be in front of her, and I've done that to her. There's just something different about watching a rocket launch when there are people on board. You feel a little bit differently about the pit of your stomach, and I can only tell you it's multiplied significantly when it's somebody that you know, and then somebody, of course, that's a family member. It's even multiplied more.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team, helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this. Now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. When is the last time humans launched on a new vehicle? Certainly on the American side, it's been several decades. Now we're in a time when we've got multiple vehicles under development. It's a great time from a space exploration time frame just to see all that happening, and it's because of this nurturing of the environment, being able to pull in a wider group of people who can contribute towards human spaceflight. It's a super cool time. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is going to get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
We're just over 49.5 minutes away from launch of the Falcon 9 carrying Dragon to the space station. Right now, the launch director and the launch team are preparing for a readiness for launch poll. In this poll, the 13 members of the launch team will electronically indicate a go for launch. This is also the go for propellant load. Now, we're going to hear that in a couple of minutes, so while we wait, we are tracking you watching from all over the country. We're seeing large numbers of you logging on or tuning in from coast to coast, as well as around the world. We want to know, is this your first time watching a launch live? If not, how many have you seen before? Tell us using the hashtag LaunchAmerica from your favorite social media website. As for me, this isn't my first one. I've seen a lot, but everyone is exciting. Now, coming up, we're going to go into a readiness poll, as I mentioned. Currently, right now, on other nets, the SpaceX launch director is checking to verify the Dragon team is ready and that the NASA launch management team is ready. They'll come back at about T-minus 47 minutes with instructions to the SpaceX Falcon 9 team to make their final assessments. Then they log into the procedure. It's a little different than the old days where you would hear a go, 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 you know, position by position, all up and down the row. In this electronic age, everybody just clicks on whether they're go or no go. The launch director will then at T-minus 45 minutes summarize the end of the poll and will then provide instructions for the team. At the same time, we will begin getting ready for the crew access arm retraction, and we'll show you that on one of the screens that we've got up. Now currently we are continuing to monitor the weather. The weather is still red. It is improving. We're looking at one cell between the radar and the pad. We're keeping our fingers crossed that conditions will improve, but we're going to be watching that for about another 15 minutes. So it looks like we're going to be good to begin propellant load once we hear the polls, but we still have to get the get the range green so that we can actually do the launch in just 47 minutes from now. Let's listen to the countdown net for a moment. Right now, coming up on 46 minutes, 10 seconds before launch. Didn't hear any significant chatter coming over countdown one.
Yes, launch director in the countdown net. Poll is complete, and we have a go to proceed with propellant load. Launch control, proceed with swing into crew arm. Arming crew arm movement for T-minus 45 minutes. Thank you, launch control. A reminder in control room on hold and launch escape protocol. For non-urgent no-go conditions, bridge CE or LD, and it will approve aborting the launch auto sequence and proceed to launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. Operators shall also advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Remain on fire alarm instructions here in Fire Room 4. In the event of a fire alarm, key operators, previously briefed, will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personal safety is threatened, we will evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. One final reminder, they'll be arming the launch escape system momentarily. Need all personnel, please stay in your seats from now through orbit insertion and Dragon separation from the second stage.
Crew access arm retract has started.
And you've heard Mike Taylor, the SpaceX launch director, give instructions to the team. We've also just heard the call. The crew access arm retraction is underway. Great view from the camera inside the White Room as we see the arm moving away from the Dragon capsule, one of the major events necessary to get down to T0. The next one coming up will be arming of the escape system on the Dragon capsule. Now, right now, the next plan for Falcon 9, T-minus 35 minutes, we will begin loading propellant onto the first and second stages. Now, currently, Falcon 9's looking good, Dragon's looking good. The range continues to be go for launch in terms of the clearance around the launch pad, both the air and the sea space. Looking at the flight corridor, the ground stations, the NASA tracking and data relay satellites are ready to support. And we just continue to monitor the weather. Our team is getting constant updates. We're monitoring weather data sensors around the launch site, looking to make sure that we can get everything into the green position. The one that we're mostly looking at right now is how much rain we're going to get between now and liftoff, whether it's just going to be mild precipitation that's within the rules for loading propellant, That's what the expectation is, but we're going to continue to watch that. So fingers crossed, but right now coming up at T-minus 43 minutes, 18 seconds and counting, everything but the weather's go, and the weather is trending in the right direction. So we've got our fingers crossed here. At this time, we're going to send it back over to Kennedy Space Center as the action is picking up on the launch pad.
Thanks, John I. Now that countdown clock is continuing to tick, and we are 42 minutes and 46 seconds away from launch. Now, as you just saw, the crew arm retracted. That is the last major visual milestone before liftoff. And we should be hearing out on the net soon confirmation that the launch escape system is armed. When that happens, all 8 of the Super Draco throttle valves are opened, which means that those engines can ignite.
For section 7.
Okay. So that means those 8 throttle valves are opened, and if those Super Dracos needed to fire in order for a Dragon to escape off of the pad, they could.
And so things running just a little bit ahead of schedule right now.
Field lead is complete.
Now, we just saw the crew access arm retract just a minute ago. We saw NASA astronauts Doug Hurley.
In 7.2, our visors are closed, and we're arming the launch escape system.
So we just heard the astronauts confirm that they are about to arm the launch escape system. That happens just before fueling begins, which we expect to happen in just a couple of minutes. We saw Bob and Doug suit up a little over 3 hours ago. Then we watched them drive out to Launch Complex 39A. They were assisted by the SpaceX ground team with Crew Dragon ingress. That happened a little before 2 o'clock this afternoon. And then we saw the spacecraft hatch close. And again, just a minute ago, we saw the crew access arm retract. We just heard that the crew armed the launch escape system. And in just a few minutes, we are going to hear the call that they have started propellant loading.
Launch escape system is verified armed.
So we just heard that verification that the launch escape system is armed.
We're switching to GN2.
And we are going to send it over to Hawthorne to take us through prop loading. Jesse?
From the parachutes to the launch escape system, SpaceX has designed Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 to be the safest launch vehicle ever flown. And joining us today, we have SpaceX's Nick Picone, who was our mission manager for our in-flight abort mission earlier this year and currently works on the Starlink team. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Hey, Jesse. I'm here at the Launch and Landing Recovery Center with the recovery team and our Dragon ground operations team monitoring the launch.
Awesome. Can you tell us more about the critical safety features on this new version of Dragon?
Sure. So Dragon 2 was designed with long-term reuse and reliability in mind. So fundamentally, there are multiple layers of redundancy to any of the failure modes that we could conceive of, that NASA could conceive of when we were working to design and test this vehicle over the past few years. But in the event that we encounter an unforeseen failure mode or multiple failures which push us outside of our design space, Dragon also has backup systems and operational controls intended to keep Bob and Doug safe. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it today, but the launch escape system is the primary backup system that we have from the moment that the vehicle is here on pad being fueled all the way up until orbital insertion. At a high level, the launch escape system, in the event of a major Falcon anomaly or emergency, will terminate Falcon thrust, separate Dragon from Falcon, and it'll use Dragon's 8 Super Draco engines to quickly pull the vehicle away from any kind of Falcon anomaly.
And you talked a lot about the launch escape system. How exactly is that activated? Is it autonomous? Is it manually activated?
Definitely. So for this system to work as designed, you have to remember that the vehicle could be flying at hundreds or thousands of miles an hour through the lower atmosphere. So it's really important that it's extremely fast and highly reliable with very low chance of false positives. The launch escape system fundamentally is set to look at a set of pre-programmed criteria which are on board the vehicle. Dragon and Falcon are looking at high rate telemetry, looking for abnormal vehicle dynamics, loss of communication between critical systems, or manual commanding. Our launch director and chief engineer, who you've heard a lot from today, are capable of sending a manual command to Dragon to initiate a launch escape. And Bob and Doug are also always able to actuate the launch escape handle and initiate a launch escape themselves as well. Now that the system is armed, all of this is currently active on the vehicle.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot that goes into it. And we did have an in-flight abort test earlier this year to test this out. Can you tell us what we learned from that test?
Definitely. It was possibly the most flight-like test of an orbital class booster in history. It was a fully flight-like test using a full Falcon 9 rocket, which we had to knowingly destroy in order to get this fully integrated system. For folks who didn't get a chance to see it, the vehicle followed a normal crew launch trajectory about a minute and a half into flight. We had Dragon autonomously trigger the launch escape system based on a reconfiguration of those triggers I was just talking about.
For propellant
and thankfully we had
Test.
We continued through flight, had a successful parachute deployment and splashdown, and we did see Falcon rather spectacularly blow up about 10 seconds after separation. It's important to recognize that all of that happens from command to actual separation of the vehicle in under half a second.
Wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us and talking through those details with us. Enjoy the launch today.
And welcome to Kopernik's live stream. In about 2 minutes, we will have a brief presentation by Roy Williams about the Crew Dragon and Falcon systems. And so hang on, and we'll return you to the live stream from NASA. But at 4 o'clock, we'll do about a 10 or 15 minute presentation prior to the scheduled launch. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them into the live chat on YouTube, and we will do our best to answer them when time allows.
Going through my crew notebook, I was thinking about, what my first step would be if there was a malfunction, because usually everything goes nominally when you fly to space, but you have to think about the things that you have to take care of, the first steps you have to take care of. And on my mission, I was calling out the abort calls, like if we had lost an engine, where would we go next, when the different abort calls around the country and around the world. So I think that's what those guys are probably thinking about now, and just really getting ready for this mission to go off.
Absolutely, and we're just now about 20 seconds from when we expect propellant loading to start. Again, that's fueling of the rocket.
All right, we're getting close. We should hear that call out any second now on the nets. So let's listen in.
Propellant load has started.
Fantastic. So prop load has started. We've started loading liquid oxygen on stage 1 and stage 2. And yeah, liquid oxygen and RP1, which is our rocket grade kerosene. So now that we are 34 minutes and 42 seconds away from the first launch of astronauts into orbit from American soil since 2011, we know that the launch escape system is armed, which happened just before fueling. Dragon prop load happened weeks ago, actually just a few miles down the road at what we call Dragon Land. And those propellants, which are MMH, or monomethyl hydrogen, that's our fuel, and NTO, or nitrogen tetroxide, that's our oxidizer, those not only feed the Draco engines that propel Dragon on orbit, but they also supply those 8 Super Draco engines of the launch escape system. So I have one right here, a little model. Oh, it doesn't come off the stand.
Don't break it, Lauren.
All right, I know, it's very nice. So as you can see, the Dragon is actually broken up into 4 quads, and each quad has 2 of the Super Draco engines for a total of 8 of them. And as I mentioned, they are biprop engines. They have MMH and NTO as their oxidizer. Now, most abort systems from past space vehicles, I believe like Soyuz, Mercury, Apollo, they all had a pointy escape tower on top where there was essentially like a mini rocket engine or a series of rocket engines on top. And if they weren't used, that escape tower would have to jettison.
We are now going to switch to a presentation by Roy Williams about this mission. Go ahead, Roy.
Well, thank you, Drew. Thanks a lot. So, welcome to Kopernik Observatory's live stream. We are watching a very historic event. It's called America's Return to Flight, and we're going to be watching from the Kennedy Space Center the Falcon 9 rocket carrying 2 astronauts on board on their way up to the International Space Station. So we are looking at the weather. They're all looking at the weather down there at the Cape. That's probably the biggest hurdle to cross so far, but there's about 17 different variables that they look at, and we'll be finding out soon if we pass them all. But okay, so to start off with, we got a little presentation here to kind of show you. Okay, and here's Kopernik Observatory, and we do lots of great things here at Kopernik Observatory, lots of different classes. Here this picture to the lower right shows us with local vessel astronaut Dan Birch when he was visiting here. And our Girl Power program. Whoops. And over to the left there is us talking to the International Space Station. It's something we do every summer. We try to get to talk to the International Space Station using a ham radio. And here's a picture taken by drones over Broome County, courtesy of them. Fantastic group that goes around and take fantastic shots of the area. You can see our 3 main domes of the observatory. And anyway, let's move on. Here we go. So what we got here is SpaceX is returning human spaceflight to the United States with one of the safest and most advanced systems ever built. And NASA's Commercial Crew Program is a turning point for America's future in space exploration that lays the groundwork for the future missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond. So just kind of backing up what SpaceX is all about. SpaceX is a private industry, and they started actually, Elon Musk, who started PayPal years and years ago, sold PayPal to eBay and decided to make his own rocket company. So what a great entrepreneur who came from South Africa and started SpaceX in the United States. So what NASA is doing lately, the last 10 years or so, is NASA is doing cooperation with private industries to get us back into space. So this public-private partnership is really the cornerstone of what's going on now in human spaceflight. SpaceX is just one of the companies. We also have Boeing that also has made a capsule that will be visiting the space station. So here's our crew today, the crew of Demo 2. By the way, it's called Demo 2 because there was an unmanned flight that went up to the space station called Demo 1. We got Colonel Bob Benken and Colonel Doug Hurley. Now, just give you a little bio on each one of these gentlemen. Doug Hurley, who's actually from Appalachian, New York, which is near Owego. He graduated from Owego High School, and he was selected in year 2000, and he's flown twice on the space shuttle, STS-127 as well as STS-135. In fact, that STS mission 135 was the very last space shuttle mission that he piloted, and that was nine years ago. So it's been since 2011 since we've launched our own people. We've been hitching rides with the Russians, and now it's time for us to do it on our own. Robert Benken, it was also selected in year 2000. He flew twice on the space shuttle in 2008 and 2010. He has 700 hours logged in space, as well as 37 hours for spacewalks, 3 separate spacewalks on one particular flight. And he is born in Maryland Heights, Missouri. And here's a look at the rocket here and the different components. So we'll talk about what each stage does. So the first stage is the largest segment that's on the bottom there. And this is the Falcon 9 rocket. You might be thinking, well, why do they call it 9? Why 9? Well, because it has 9 Merlin engines. It seems like they've taken a theme here in terms of mythology, Merlin, and as well as dragon. So it sounds like Lord of the Rings or something. So Merlin engines, and they run on kerosene and liquid oxygen, just like the old Saturn V. The first stage of the Saturn V rocket, the moon rocket, did the same thing, had the same fuel, kerosene and liquid oxygen. Altogether, the 9 engines will produce 1.5 million pounds of thrust. All right. They'll burn for 2.5 minutes and get the rocket to an altitude of 50 miles. All right. Now, at that point, the second stage will separate from the first stage, and that takes about 11 seconds for that to occur, and that's always a tricky, staging is always a tricky situation there. And the second stage has only one Merlin engine, so the same type of engine, but just one of them, and that produces about 2,000 pounds of thrust. Now, that will actually burn longer for about 7 minutes to get it into orbit. So the whole ride there takes about 10 minutes to get into orbit, and it's going to take a little while to chase down the space station. All right, so it takes about 19 hours to catch up to the space station. So the Dragon spacecraft carries up to 7 passengers. However, this is a demonstration flight, an experimental flight, only flying 2 astronauts on board today. The pressurized section of the capsule is designed to carry both people and environmentally sensitive cargo. Its diameter is about 13 feet in diameter. Height is almost 30 feet. Capsule volume is 330 cubic feet. And then there's something called the trunk. The trunk is, in the old days with the Apollo spacecraft, the trunk in this case is, is what would be called the service module back then. This inside the trunk, it's basically what it says it is. It's a trunk. You can put things in there. You can put payloads in there. It's also physically where the solar panels for the spacecraft are housed. And here is the flight path, kind of a flight diagram showing you what's going to be happening when. Launch, it clears the tower. It goes through the ascent phase. You have what we call main engine cutoff occurring. You're going to hear something called MECO. We'll talk about that. And then the second stage fires, and it's on its way. Now, the first stage, and this is what's great about SpaceX, their goal has been to make reusable spacecrafts. So the first stage is going to do a flip around and start flying back to Florida, and it will actually land on a drone ship out in the ocean about 20 miles off the coast of Florida. Sometimes they actually do make it back to land and land right next to almost right next to the launch pad. So it's very exciting. We'll see that come down as well, hopefully. And anyway, the second stage will continue on with the capsule into orbit. All right. This is what the first stage looks like as it's coming down. You would think this looks like CGI, but this is a really cool picture of the real thing, of a telephoto lens catching it as it's going down. The square things at the top of the rocket there are called the grid fins. They slow it down during descent, and they also help steer it. So it's a very primitive type of simple system to bring it down. And as it gets closer and closer to the ground, it fires an engine, the center engine of the 9, and it slows it down, and then little feet come out, and it lands perfectly. And of course, landing on the ship itself is definitely more difficult than landing on land, because the ship could be bobbing up and down in the waves and so forth. So, all right, and this is one of the things I want to point out. During the launch, if it goes off today, you're going to get to see, at some point, they're going to show a split screen. So you're going to be thinking, what are we looking at here? Well, to the right is the glow of the single Merlin engine on the second stage, and you can see the curvature of the Earth. On the left is the first stage descending toward Florida. In this case, it looks like they're right over the Cape and they're going to land on land, which is always spectacular. And at the bottom of the view, you'll see, probably can't see it too well on this slide, but there will be a slide that kind of indicates where they are in the flight path, which is really nice. You'll also see 2 boxes, one for speed, which will be in kilometers per hour. That might be a little odd. And then also how high it is in kilometers. So here it is landing. Here is what hopefully will happen today, is that the first stage will land on the drone ship successfully. Here's give you an idea what it looks like. And then finally, after they stay on the space station, now we don't know how long the astronauts are going to stay on the space station. They're thinking 1 to 4 months. Originally it was going to be a couple of days, but now they're extending it to 1 to 4 months. And so you must imagine being their spouse, their wife, saying, "What's going on? Now you're going to be up there for like 2 or 3 months or something." So it's not such a simple test drive, I guess. But Anyway, they're going to come down in parachutes and land in the Atlantic Ocean. All right, countdown. What I want to do now is kind of give you a rundown of what goes on during the countdown and then also during the launch. Some of the things. So we've already passed some of this at T-minus 3 hours. You load up the kerosene, the RP1 rocket grade kerosene at T-minus 2 hours, 35 minutes. And yeah, by the way, it's hours and then colon minutes. The loading of the liquid oxygen, and if you're cool, you call that LOX. Okay, and T-minus 1 hour, 30 minutes, LOX and RP1 is loading is complete. By the way, they're actually doing this when the astronauts are on board, which NASA rockets, they never did that. Now, 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes to go. Terminal count, auto sequence started. All right. And then at 2 minutes ago, this is when decisions are really made. The flight director verifies go for launch, as well as the range safety officer from the United States Air Force. What they're doing is they're going to look at, is there any aircraft in the way? Is there any boats downrange from the rocket? And sometimes that has happened. There's been shuttle launches that have been delayed because somebody had a boat too close to that area of water where they don't want them to be. And then with 1 minute to go, the computer takes over for a final pre-launch checks. All right, at 3 seconds, one more thing before that. At 40 seconds to go, pressurized propellant tanks turn on Niagara water. Well, what's that? There's something called a sound suppression water system. These rockets are so loud that they let millions of gallons of water fall underneath the launch pad, and that water absorbs the sound from the rocket. This was something that was developed after the first space shuttle mission. The very first space shuttle mission, they found out it shook the vehicle a lot more than they really expected just from the sound. So you'll hear something about the sound suppression water system. And then at 3 seconds to go, the controller commands engine ignition sequence. So basically, at 3 seconds to go, you can't fire all 9 engines at once. There's milliseconds apart, getting these engines up to speed, up to 100%. At 0 seconds to go, all 9 engines are at 100%, and the clamps release the rocket. So that's how liftoff works. Now, moving on to the flight itself, to kind of give you an idea. Again, hours/minutes here. So which is kind of hard to read, but at 58 seconds to go, max Q occurs. Well, what's max Q? Max Q is maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. So as the vehicle is increasing in speed, even though it's going higher and you're getting through, the atmosphere is thinner, there's kind of a sweet spot where you're going faster and the air is pressing on the vehicle. And that sweet spot is called max Q. And that's where the vehicle's shaking the most. And at that point, you generally throttle your engines back down a little bit to get through that max Q. And that's about right around when they're going supersonic as well. The first stage at 3 minutes ago, first stage, MECO, main engine cutoff. You're going to hear that. I think that's about 2:50, 2 minutes 50 seconds on main engine cutoff. And then there's that little delay where in staging. Takes about 11 seconds for the second stage to start its engines. Though they generally show inside the vehicle itself, looking at that single Merlin engine of the second stage, and you're going to see the separation of the first stage, and then you're going to see the glow of that engine turn on, and it's going to turn bright orange, very spectacular. So look out for that. And then the second stage engine at 9 minutes into the flight, SECO, second stage engine cutoff, occurs. And we're on our way to the International Space Station. That's pretty much it. All right. And then a minute later, the capsule actually separates from the main vehicle. Now, during that time, that once the second stage separates, that's when the first stage is going to be coming down. So there's going to be a lot to watch. You're going to be watching 2 different cameras. All right, here we go. I think that's pretty much it, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we'll take some, how are we doing on time, Drew? And we'll take some questions. I'm not sure I know they're going to be making a decision whether to fly or not. So
I think what we're going to do is we're going to cut back to the NASA feed and see where we're at. And
all right.
And give me a second here to get that going. And
there's our spacesuits. That's Doug Hurley. And there we go. We're still on the launch pad. Okay, great.
This is a chance for me to say something. Hi, my name is Tish Brzee. I'm your Solar System Ambassador here for NASA and the Jet Propulsion Lab, and I'm learning a lot about SpaceX. Thanks a lot, Roy. That was cool. Let's see where we're at right now. Check in with the countdown.
And we're going to continue to listen in for an update, but in the meantime, we're going to go over to John Innsbrucker at SpaceX headquarters in California. John?
And Dragon SpaceX on weather. We're still
T-minus 18 minutes and counting.
LD is
we are still red
some
on weather.
Expect an update from LD.
We're waiting in about another minute for one final check with weather. We're going to check at T-minus 17 minutes possibly. We don't really expect that things will have improved. The weather officer was not optimistic that the weather would clear up that rapidly. We did hear the launch director, Mike Taylor, joke that if we could move 10 more minutes past the T0, weather conditions may improve, but Mike was not able to do that. We have an instantaneous window today. So at 17 minutes, we want to make that call because shortly after that, we will begin loading liquid oxygen onto the second stage. So if we're not going to have the opportunity to launch, if the clock's going to run out, stand by.
We continue to violate a couple different weather rules that we now do not expect to clear in time to allow for a launch today. We go ahead and end today's launch attempt. Launch control would end the launch auto sequence and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence, please. Launch abort has started.
And Dragon SpaceX, unfortunately, we are not going to launch today. You are go for 5.100 launch scrub.
5.100. It was a good effort by the teams, and we understand, and we'll meet you there.
Copy all.
We've heard the call from the crew. They have been informed. Launch director Mike Taylor has called a scrub for the day, and we got the feedback when the Dragon team informed Bob and Doug. They said we gave it a good try, but they understand, and we are here to try another day. So right now we did officially hold the clock. It looks like at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. The launch automatic sequence that controls the Falcon 9, the loading of propellants, the cycling of valves, that is also stopped. We now proceed into what is a normal...
Am I live? Okay, folks. As you can see, it's a scrub. That's a term by NASA, which means that try it another day. So we're going to look on, it's going to be Saturday at 3:20. So basically, weather conditions are just not permittable for letting them fly. So better luck next time. It happens quite a bit. I know John Glenn, when he first went off, took over a dozen times to actually lift off. So that's just the luck of the draw. So the rocket was ready, but it looks like the weather was not cooperating.
All right, and we will continue the video for a little bit longer. And what we will do is we will announce, once we get a better sense from NASA, when their live feed will pick back up again. We will do a very similar live feed on our YouTube channel, and we appreciate some of the input. We're sort of new to this, and so we know we've got some technical improvements we can make. Got some thoughts on how to do that, but anyway.
And please don't forget to like and subscribe, especially when you subscribe to the channel. You'll get an automatic notification for the next launch.
Right, every time we go live. So anyway, we will return you to the NASA feed for at least a little while longer, and we'll look forward to picking this back up again on Saturday.
And today we've done a wet dress rehearsal, but sorry, we just couldn't get there, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, John I. And obviously, we can't control the weather. We came right down to the wire there, hoping we could just squeeze in between those cloud systems to get a launch today, but it wasn't to be. But it doesn't mean we're done. We're going to have another attempt coming up in just 3 days, so we're going to be doing this all over again, essentially, on Saturday, on the 30th. And that launch attempt is going to be coming at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time, so a little bit earlier in the day. It's going to look largely the same to everything that we saw today, with the crew waking up, going through suit up, making their way to the pad. So we're going to feel a lot of deja vu, I think, on Saturday.
Yep. But still exciting. Safety is always first, so if weather was not there for us today, hopefully Saturday it will be there for us and we will have a safe launch on Saturday.
Yeah, the initial weather report still had us at about, I think, a 40% possibility of violation, so weather a little bit better, but we're still going to be kind of rolling the dice. It is Florida in the spring and summer, so storms are always a possibility. One of the good things, though, the vehicle appeared to be in great health throughout the day, both Dragon and Falcon 9, so we didn't have to scrub for any technical issue. We're going to continue and follow along with Bob and Doug until they're out of that capsule, as again, they had started loading fuel onto the Falcon 9 rocket, so they'll have to wait until all that fuel comes off. They'll disarm the launch escape system, which still stays armed because they're still sitting on a partially loaded rocket, and then once they're able to disarm that launch escape system, the crew arm will swing back out. They'll make their way once again back the way they came, and then it'll be back to crew quarters for Bob and Doug for a few more days. But if you're just now tuning in, wondering why we're not still counting down, we did have a launch scrub today. We were just a little under
Stage
17
1 launch
minutes.
and fuel flow rates are nominal for offload. Expecting.
So that call out, the LOX, the liquid oxygen fuel pumping out of the first stage of the Falcon 9, everything looking good with that. Expecting about 40 minutes for all that fuel to come off. So again, once that fuel comes off, Bob and Doug will be able to disarm the launch escape system, and that crew access arm will swing back out. They'll be able to make their way back down and then over to crew quarters. So unfortunate scrub today because of weather. That was the one thing we were tracking from the moment we started today, watching Bob and Doug get suited up for their launch. We did abort today's launch, or scrub today's launch, with a little under 17 minutes to go until our T0 time, which was 4:33. So that's going to move us to our next attempt, which is coming up on Saturday, and that time is going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time, so a little bit earlier in the day for Bob and Doug and for everybody else watching around the world. They're still going to have a 19-hour flight to station if that's when we launch, and a lot of the stuff that we saw today is going to look very similar, but we're just going to have to try again, cross our fingers, hope for a little bit better weather the next time.
And again, this goes with every launch. We do track everything all the way down to T0 to make sure that everything is go, making sure that the range is go, weather is go. So this is standard procedure. We always tend to make sure that we have a backup day, launch day, in case we do have scrubs like today. So this is pretty normal and standard. Nothing to be worried about. Again, we do this for the safety of our vehicles, as well as today we had astronauts on our vehicle. So even bigger reason for us to make sure that we have safe weather for them to fly.
And just a reminder for everyone still tuned in, it takes about 40 minutes for all of this propellant to come off of the Falcon 9. And while it is offloading that launch escape system on Dragon, which is designed to pull the capsule away if there's any issue with the rocket or anything on the pad, that is still armed. So we're going to continue to stay with this until all the propellant's off, and then we'll see the launch escape system get disarmed. Bob and Doug will be able to open up their visors again. The crew access arm will swing back out and link up with Dragon, and they'll make their way off and then down the tower at the pad. But if you're just now tuning in, no launch today. We did have to scrub because of weather. We're going to be moving to our second attempt on Saturday, just a little bit earlier in the afternoon. Just going to continue to stand by as this propellant comes off. We heard a call that everything was going nominally or as expected so far. And then once all the propellant's off, we should see Bob and Doug make their way out of Dragon shortly after.
All right, well, we are going to end our live stream here this afternoon. And again, look to our website. We'll also send an email out on our plans for Saturday once we know for sure what kind of a live feed we can get from NASA. And look forward to to seeing you on the live stream. Thanks again for coming and joining us this